The Royal Mile is just a few yards up the hill from here, the ancient route from the castle to the palace of Holyrood. The castle was built atop a volcanic rock shaped by glaciers into an almost perfect defensive site which has been fortified since prehistoric times. The name Edinburgh comes from Edwinesborough, Edwin being the King of Northumbria in 617, who held the lands here and had a fortress on the castle rock. The oldest part of the present structure is a tiny church, just 26 feet by 10 feet, dating from 1100, St Margaret's Chapel. Queen, later Saint Margaret, was the sister of Edgar Atheling, King-elect of England after Harold died at Hastings. She fled to Scotland and married Malcolm III. When Robert the Bruce captured the castle in 1313, all the buildings were destroyed, with the sole exception of the chapel. The castle was last attacked in 1745, but whilst the city fell to the Jacobite army, the castle held strong. It is home to the Scottish Crown Jewels, the oldest royal regalia in the UK, and also home to the Stone of Destiny, which was returned to Scotland in advance of the devolved Parliament, and fulfilled the ancient prophecy that the stone would always be found at the place from which the country is ruled. Strange stories are told on our Perthshire titles about the Stone of Destiny, which once lay at Scone Palace, another of our many title sponsors. Edinburgh Castle was also the birthplace of Mary's son, James VI of Scotland, and later James I of England. However, whilst some maintenance work was being carried out in 1830, a tiny coffin was found hidden inside the royal apartments. Within it was a baby in a golden shroud embroidered with the letter J. Was this the infant James? Had he been substituted, some say by the Earl and Countess of Mar's son, who greatly resembled the future monarch, as contemporary portraits of the time show? Directly below the castle on the Royal Mile is High Street, which was at one time regarded as not being equalled by any street in Europe. This predated the boulevards of Paris or Nash's Regent Street in London. The width of the street is still remarkable, particularly for one of a medieval design. The astonishing height of the buildings also was imposing. As a walled city, space was limited, therefore the houses were built high, and people of all ranks would occupy the different floors, as determined by their status or class. Truly upper, middle and lower class in that order. Built of local sandstone, many of the buildings have been cleaned to reveal the rose-pink and fawn shades hidden by the dirt and grime of centuries of city life. The Royal Mile is still a maze of narrow winds and streets, and the guides of the old town were known as caddies, the term still used today in relation to golf. Here is St Giles, the High Kirk of Scotland, built by the Benedictine followers of Giles the Saint. His arm bone was said to lie here until about 1577, when it disappeared. His other arm bone is at St Giles at Bruges. John Knox was preacher here, and is buried in the old kirkyard, now under flagstones. His statue, however, is in the kirk. The kirk is also home to the relatively recent and magnificent Thistle Chapel, added in 1911 for the most ancient and most noble order of the Thistle. Continue down the Royal Mile, passing John Knox's house, which dates back to the 16th century. Certainly a person bearing the name John Knox did live in it at some stage, but the house was built for James Mossman, the goldsmith to Mary Queen of Scots, who was executed in 1573 for treason. A few yards on and we reach the site of Netherbow Port. This was one of the 6 gates leading into the old city that sadly was demolished in 1764. However, some years earlier, in 1745, the gate was opened to allow entry to some returning emissaries after a meeting with Bonnie Prince Charlie to discuss the city's capitulation. Whatever was agreed at the meeting is not known, but Cameron of Lochiel and 800 Highlanders rushed the guard and the city fell to the Jacobites.